Super Bowl 59 is less than a week away, and the sports world at large is gearing up for another record-breaking event. In 2024, over 124 million people tuned into the NFL's biggest game, making it not only the most-watched Super Bowl in league history, but also the most-watched television program in U.S. history. Take that, Mass Series finale. CBS generated nearly $700 million in advertising revenue from last year's game, which explains why, this year, some brands are paying Fox a record $8 million for 30-second spots. This year's host, Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, is currently selling 45-person suites for $1.3 million a pop, coming out to around $29,000 per person. That's a lot of money considering it doesn't even take into account the thousands of dollars fans will spend on flights, food, hotels, and entertainment. Truly, there's nothing else like the Super Bowl. Sure, soccer fans will argue the Men's World Cup is a bigger deal on a global scale, getting billions of viewers worldwide. Now that may be true, but the World Cup only happens once every 4 years. It's a tournament, and more importantly, it isn't monetized nearly as well as the Super Bowl. Don't believe me? Why don't you just take a walk down to the Mississippi River this week and tell me what you see? Instead of the usual steamboats, cargo ships, tankers, barges, and tugboats passing through the French Quarter on their way to the Gulf of Mexico, you'll see a yacht named Kismet. Kismet, which means destiny, is a 300-foot 12 super yacht owned by Jacksonville Jaguars owner and Gene Shalit lookalike Shahid Khan. The $360 million yacht has everything you would expect, including a pool, a movie theater, sauna, and helipad, and has been chartered by celebrities like Jay-Z and Beyonce for the low price of $1.2 million a week. This super yacht wouldn't be in New Orleans if it wasn't for the Super Bowl. Why else would Shahid Khan spend 6 figures transporting the boat from the US Virgin Islands to New Orleans? The Super Bowl is a show, so you might as well bring your yacht. Now, you can argue about whether this level of monetization is ultimately good for football. I, for one, don't love the fact that the Super Bowl has turned into what is essentially a corporate conference, with league partners snapping up many of the 80,000 available tickets. Real fans should be able to attend these games, and secondary ticketing platforms definitely don't help the situation. Not to mention the fact that the NFL distributes 75% of the tickets to NFL teams, and keeps the remaining 25% for corporate sponsors. We can save that argument for another day, though, because I think the more interesting part about the Super Bowl is how its immense audience creates unique marketing opportunities. An executive at one of the world's largest tech companies recently told me that his company would always choose to advertise with the NFL because it was the only way to reach tens of millions of live viewers with a single commercial. And while most people focus on Fox's $8 million rate for 30-second commercials, the Super Bowl halftime show is an even better example of what I'm talking about. In the early years of the Super Bowl era, the halftime show was simply a big performance from a series of marching bands. As the big game grew, so did the halftime show, and in 1993, Michael Jackson became the first pop star to headline the halftime show, and if there were an internet back then, it surely would have broken that night. The King of Pop's halftime show was watched by 133 million Americans and more than 1 billion people worldwide. Since then, the Super Bowl's 12 to 14-minute halftime show has become must-see television. We've seen Diana Ross, U2, The Rolling Stones, Prince, Madonna, Beyonce, Dr. Dre, and of course, who could forget the most famous of them all, Left Shark. Artists love it because more than 100 million people watch them perform. The NFL spends months promoting it because it's a smart way to attract additional viewers who don't necessarily care about the game. Fans have even started to obsess over which artist might be picked to perform before the official announcement is made, with fan bases like Little Monsters and the Bayhive using the announcement as bragging rights to reaffirm their fandom. The craziest part though, rather than paying these artists their standard 7-figure performance fee, the NFL has convinced all of these megastars to do the show for free. Well, kinda. The NFL still has to pay them minimum wage to avoid any labor law issues, but that's like buying a ticket to the Louvre and leaving with the Mona Lisa, a small price to pay for a big reward. I know this makes no sense. The NFL generates more than $20 billion in annual revenue, so why are they treating these award-winning artists like interns looking to break into the industry? The answer? Leverage. Rather than convincing a popular artist to perform for free, the NFL has partnered with Jay-Z's Rock Nation to strategically target artists who can effectively take advantage of the exposure. Here's how it works. Apple Music pays the NFL $50 million to sponsor the halftime show. The NFL pockets $35 million of that money and uses the remaining $15 million as the production budget for the halftime show. This budget includes everything, from set design, backup dancers, 3,000 part-time workers, security, and as always, marketing. Some artists have been known to go over that budget, like The Weeknd, who spent an additional $7 million of his own money on the halftime show in 2021. Clearly, red suits and face bandages aren't cheap. The Weeknd felt comfortable spending so much of his own money because he knew it would pay dividends on the back end. Think about it this way. If a 30-second commercial is worth $8 million this year, how much is a 12 to 14-minute uninterrupted performance worth? Almost every artist wants to perform at the Super Bowl for this exact reason, but you don't want to waste the opportunity. That's why many of the world's best artists try to take advantage of the exposure by timing up their halftime performance with album releases or concert tours starting soon after the show. Take Usher, for instance. He released his album, Coming Home, 2 days before his performance at last year's Super Bowl. He, unsurprisingly, also scheduled a concert tour for later that summer, selling 360,000 pre-sale tickets days before the big game. This led to a 40% increase in ticket prices, and Usher eventually had to expand the tour from 24 to 44 shows. Usher might be one of a kind as an artist, but the Super Bowl surge is something we've seen happen with artists year after year. Lady Gaga's album Joanne was first released in October of 2016, and after debuting at #1 in its first week, the album sales dropped by 70% in the second week and fell to #5 on the Billboard charts. 4 months later though, after performing at Super Bowl 51, the record climbed all the way up the streaming charts to #2. Travis Scott's performance fee doubled from $500,000 to $1 million after Super Bowl 53. The Weeknd sold an additional 1 million concert tickets within a week of Super Bowl 55. Even with the wardrobe malfunction, Justin Timberlake saw a 534% increase in music sales after Super Bowl 52. Rihanna, like always, took things up a notch after her halftime show in 2023. She gained over 3 million followers on Instagram, and searches for her company, Fenty Beauty, jumped 833% overnight. Overall, StubHub says artists typically see a 50% increase in concert ticket searches after performing at the Super Bowl. So, how does Kendrick Lamar plan on taking advantage of this year's Super Bowl surge? Well, a few ways. For starters, he's almost definitely going to play his recent Grammy-winning song and Drake diss track Not Like Us as part of his setlist. He's also got a 23-show North American tour starting April 19th at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. He's already started selling tickets for his tour, but thanks to what I assume is a well-paid PR team, you'll see a headline over the next few days bragging about his increased interest in higher prices. Kendrick Lamar has also invited SZA as a special guest during his halftime show because, you guessed it as well, she's going to be co-headlining Kendrick's multi-month tour later this year. And if that wasn't enough, Kendrick is also working with South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone on a live-action comedy movie that is set to release in July.
Jim Bob, play Kendrick Lamar.
I remember syrup sandwiches and crime allowances, finesse the dude with some counterfeit.
And of course, the 37-year-old artist is sure to finish the weekend with several million more followers on Instagram, since he's the first solo rap artist in history to headline the Super Bowl halftime show. Apple Music will do its part by promoting Kendrick's music on its app, including a selection of his tracks on the home screen, and over 100 hours of live programming on Apple Music Radio. All of this is precisely why the Super Bowl is so interesting. Sure, there's an actual football game with two teams competing for a championship, or in the Chiefs' case, another championship. But there is a game within the game as brands compete against one another for your attention and ultimately your money. And the Super Bowl halftime show is the epitome of that competition. Kendrick Lamar will be the biggest beneficiary of this year's big game. Union wages mean the NFL will pay Lamar less than $1,000 for his performance, yet he'll walk away with something much more valuable. In the coming days, millions will stream Kendrick's catalog of songs, and hundreds of thousands of others will purchase tickets to his concert tour. So whether you're Bruno Mars or a man in a shark costume, the Super Bowl halftime show is the best bang for your buck.